And we are live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Co-Mentor Office Hours. My name is Joyce, and thank you all for joining us today. If you guys can hear us, please say hi in the chat box and let us know where you're watching from. And feel free to ask questions throughout this broadcast. You should see a questions tab right underneath this video. You can ask questions, you can vote for other people's questions, and we'll get to as many as we can. We do have a limited time, so today I'm really excited that we're here with Ian Macalinao. Ian's a student at the University of Texas at Austin. And as you all know, he's previously interned at companies like Google and Uber. And today we'll be focusing on his programming journey and what the experience was like applying for and interviewing at these companies. So to get us started, Ian, could you tell us a little about your experience with programming and sort of how you got started with it?
Yeah, sure. So when I was younger, I played a game called Neopets, and basically you could make websites for your pets. So that's how I kind of got into making websites. Then later on in life, I made Minecraft mods. So Minecraft's a computer game. But yeah, I found Minecraft really fun, so I made mods for it, and I made a bunch of different features in the game. And after that, I got really into software engineering, so I decided to learn a bunch of different languages, and eventually I got jobs at Google, Uber, and Eft, and here I am today.
Great. Okay, so I'm just checking out the technical issues. Great. Okay. So for students who might be just starting out with programming in high school or middle school, do you have any tips for them, or sort of what resources or what kind of avenue they can go in for their first, I guess, to programming?
Yeah, sure. So I think if you're in high school or middle school, well, actually anyone in general, you should try to find a project you're really passionate about. So for me, back in high school, it was games, Minecraft specifically. I thought it was really cool to build things that my friends could enjoy. So try to find something that you think would be useful. Don't just like read a book on how to code. Don't just go to Codecademy and follow the tutorials, because you won't really learn that way. You have to hands-on have a project that you're passionate about, that you need to, I guess, be creative with the solution of, rather than just following tutorials and reading blog posts. You actually have to have hands-on experience. So yeah, high school, middle school,
Yeah, I think that's really great advice, because we've also heard from our users that, some people, after they go to Codecademy or Khan Academy, they can't get past that first hurdle of starting your own project. Like they can follow the tutorials, but they can't sort of start a real life project. So it's really great that you said that, just start with a real life project just right off the bat. It makes it easier. Yeah. So let's talk about sort of the application and interview process you went through for your various internships. Can you walk us through briefly sort of the process you went through for, let's say, the Google internship that you just completed?
Sure, yeah. So my Google internship had 2 phone interviews. Both of them were questions that were about the same difficulty as books out of Cracking the Coding Interview, which is a really good resource for practicing for coding interviews. If you've read it, they have a lot of different types of difficulties and problems, but I would say the problems that Google gave me were in the medium difficulty. So yeah, recursion is really important to understand. Most of my interview questions are recursion related. So yeah, recursion and dynamic programming is good. But yeah, it was only 2 phone interviews, and then I got an offer.
Okay, so you didn't have an on-site assessment or anything like that?
There was no on-site, but a lot of tech companies actually have on-sites. Like I think Facebook has an on-site interview process for interns.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. Okay, so since you've interned at a few different companies, could you tell us, was the process similar for, let's say, Uber and IFTTT, or was it completely different?
Yeah, so I think all 3 of my internships were pretty different. That was the question?
Yes.
Or my
the interview process or the application
the interview process. The application. Yes. Yeah, so Ift is a very small startup. Back when I joined, it was around 35 people. I think it's still around that. So it was a very personal interview process. They basically gave me a project and I had to complete it. And we would get on the phone about the project and how I solved certain things, why I built things the way they were. And then they flew me on site for Ift. So there's that. But Uber, on the other hand, was just 2 phone screens. One was with my future manager and then an offer. So I think bigger companies are starting to just do phone screens because they have so many applicants and they need to fill so many seats. Versus a startup would want to care more about like, is this person really the right fit? We only have 4 spots for interns, but there's hundreds of applicants, and if we mess up with this intern, if this intern's not good, then we'll lose a lot of money because we're so small. So it depends on the size of the company.
Okay, so for I guess the bigger companies, the phone screens, was it purely technical, or did they also ask about soft skills or your previous programming experience or your projects?
Yeah, so Google and Uber. Uber asked a little bit about my projects, but Google didn't at all.
Okay.
But it's mainly technical and straight out of cracking the coding interview.
Okay.
That's not true for all big companies, though. I recently interviewed with Palantir, and they asked a lot about my prior work experience and projects. So again, it also depends on the culture of the company. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess for you personally, do you find that the technical part is more difficult, or sort of like the actual interview soft skills part is more difficult?
I would say since I've had a lot of internships, the soft skills part is easier for me.
Okay.
The technical part, you have to study specific algorithmic questions out of that book, which you don't really learn on the job. So you have to kind of study for it. So it's a little different.
Okay. We have a question from Daniel Chen, who was asking, when you applied to Google, which programming languages were you proficient with?
So I was proficient with Java and Python and JavaScript mainly. Yeah, those were my main languages at the time.
Okay. Which languages did you actually use during your internship?
So actually both at Google and Uber. I used Go, Python, and JavaScript. Google uses C++ as another language, but I never touched that. But that's like the main language they use there. But for these big companies, they don't really care about what languages you know. They care more about, can you solve these technical problems in the language of your choice, because they specifically use easier languages at these big companies, or not easier, but simpler languages like Go. So I guess what matters is your engineering capability rather than how well you know the programming language.
Okay. Someone is also asking, Raj has asked in the question section that he's curious how long the wait time was before you heard back from these companies. And also, I guess, the wait time between the different phone interviews. Sure.
Usually the wait time is 1 week. And between the different interview, or 1 week after my final interview, sometimes it's shorter. Make sure you send a follow-up email. That's always a good thing to do. And usually it'll be sooner if you do that. Time between interviews. It's usually also the same period, like about a week after they give you the feedback from the interview and say whether you're going to the next round or not. And if you are going to the next round, then the next interview time depends on whatever you say is fine for you, because you have to schedule it.
Yeah. Okay. Allison also asked a question. Did you have to be chosen by a team in order to be hired? I guess after you started as an intern in these companies, did you get any more insights from sort of the interviewer perspective? Like, is it usually like a selection committee? Was it just one person? How does that work?
Okay. Yeah. So at Google, you're probably wondering about Google's process. Yeah, they have it's called the host matching phase. Basically what happens is after, well, for me, I got an offer and then they matched me with a team. But some people at Google, they have to get matched with a team before they get an offer. So yeah, that's true of Google. But at both Uber and Eft, it was I just got an offer without having a specific team.
Okay, great. Technical interviews. Someone's asking, did they ask any coding questions other than algorithms such as hardware or operating system?
No, they didn't. They just asked the basic algorithms, just stuff from the book.
Okay. And Ian also mentioned earlier, if you missed it, that the language itself is not really the key. It's more the actual algorithm if you know it. So I guess looking back at your earliest internship was at Eft, between these 3 companies, if I remember correctly?
Yeah, so Eft was my first internship.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just looking back at that, like, was there anything you wish you would have done earlier or would have done differently before you applied for these companies?
Um, would I have done different? Yeah. So I would have tried to get warm introductions. So the way I got my Eft internship, the way I applied for all my internships my freshman year, was I basically just emailed every single person I could find on the internet related to a product that I kind of liked. So I basically spammed a bunch of people. Some people replied that, you sent too many emails to this company. But that's not really the best way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
So what I should have done is I would have gone to a hackathon or something like that, because my school didn't have a very good career fair, the school I was at the time. I would have gone to a hackathon and I would have talked to people at companies that I thought were interesting, and I would have tried to get a referral through that. And with startups, it's easier to do things that way because then it just matters on the people skills rather than, I guess, interview process. Or the people skills matter more, which is what you need when you have your first internship.
Okay. Can you tell us again the book you were referring to earlier for the algorithm preparation?
Yeah, it's called Cracking the Coding Interview.
Cracking the Coding Interview. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll try and find a link for everyone and send it out later as well.
Okay.
We had a question emailed in yesterday, I believe, by Ryan, who was asking if someone doesn't become interested in computer science until after university or until when you're in university, can you sort of tell us what the most important things are, especially if you're a non-CS major, I suppose? Like, what sort of things do you think are most important if you want to get a software engineering internship?
If you want to get an internship, I think curiosity is just really important. That's true of all software engineers. You just have to really be looking at the new technologies and wanting to learn them and just understanding how they work. You shouldn't just be like understanding a specific skill and like following a bunch of tutorials and you can do a few things, but you should understand how the entire thing works. And to get an internship with that, I guess you should put yourself out there, network a lot. But for internships, it's easier to get those if you're in school. So like going to grad school would be the best way to get an internship. Otherwise, you should just go for a full-time position at a company. It doesn't really matter if Google's not your first company. Like you can go to a smaller startup for a few years and you'll learn a lot there. And then you can move to Google. I think that's the ideal career path if you didn't do CS in college.
Okay, great. I'm just sort of sorting through the questions. Okay. So what do you think are some of the advantages to interning at a very well-known company like Google, or as opposed to interning to a startup like Eft?
So the advantage there is you have a bigger network. You meet a lot of different people working on different things. So at a startup, you only meet the people working on your product because the product's so small. But a large company like Google, I met people from all different departments. So it was really interesting. I think at large companies, people in general are smarter in terms of, I guess, raw intelligence. But maybe it's because Google has a lot of internal technologies and I didn't know them. But yeah, basically all the people from the top schools, like the top of the top, go to Google because it's just a really cushy job. It's the most attractive. There are really smart people at startups, but it's less concentrated than it is at Google. Other things, I would say the perks are really nice. You've probably heard of like Google's cafeterias.
The legendary perks we've all heard of, yes.
There's a lot of them. I kept learning about new perks as my summer went on. It just doesn't stop. Also, obviously your resume looks better on your resume if you worked for a well-known tech company that has a good reputation for hiring good engineers.
Are there any advantages to interning at a startup?
Yeah, I think at a startup you get a wider breadth of skills. So like at Google, for example, you'd only work with like, let's say, a specific backend service of a team. So it's like a very small part of the thing. Like let's say it's the query language that Google uses in the backend to search Bigtable for certain documents. So it's like really specific. But at Eft, I was working on like, we have an open source page that lists all our open source projects. I worked on like optimizing some caching stuff making the website faster. I worked on a lot of back-end stuff, like, migrating push notifications from one service to another. So basically I worked on all different things in a lot of different kinds of languages. And I was able to look at all parts of the puzzle. Versus at Google, you're looking at a small piece of everything.
Mhm. Is it fair to say that it's probably easier to actually make an impact as opposed to, like, on the product's users if you're at a startup, as opposed to at Google, where you're working on a very, very small niche thing where it might not really impact a large user base?
So it depends on how you define impact. So like the impact you make at a startup is if you like within your startup, you've made a larger percentage of change because this company's smaller. So the difference is a startup has a much smaller user base, so it won't get out to as many people. Versus at Google, let's say you optimize some MapReduce so that runs like 50% faster. So you're impacting like tens of millions of people, but it's like a really small change that no one outside of Google will really see, and maybe outside your team. And it might be of a small product that's part of the larger picture of Google. So it might improve something by 1%, and you'll make tens of millions of dollars in impact. But percentage-wise, the impact is not really that much.
Yeah, okay. That makes a lot of sense. So let's sort of talk about what the day-to-day as a software engineering intern is like. Can you sort of briefly walk us through maybe a typical day at work?
Sure. So at Google, which I'll describe, I was a site reliability engineering intern. They basically maintain they keep systems running. So they're known for coming in late. So I would come in around 10:30 to 11. I would work on my project. At Google, you're basically assigned a project for the entire. I would do some of that. I would email some people. I'd get lunch at one of the cafes or something, maybe with a friend. I'd talk to my host and sync up about the project. I'd work a little bit more, and then I leave around 5 to 6. Sometimes later, and sometimes they come in earlier. It depends on how much work there is that week. But it's pretty laid back, honestly. Since you're an intern, they make you focus more on learning rather than going to a bunch of meetings and doing a lot of work. I think at big companies, they put you on less critical projects, so you just don't have to go to as many meetings, and you just focus on whatever your project is, which is basically they make you build this project to see if you're a good fit for a full-time role.
Do you know what sort of the percentages, how likely it is for you to get asked back for a full-time position after you've interned at a company, or say at Google?
Yeah, at Google, I heard it's around it's like 50 to 70%, something like that. Okay. But with Google, you actually have to re-interview, do another technical interview or 2 technical interviews, and that's using your feedback to see if you could get a full-time role. Okay. But yeah, I think Google is unique with that. I know Facebook doesn't do that. They don't make you re-interview, and it just depends on your performance during the internship.
So I guess getting an internship is a really good way to get your foot in the door early while you're still a student.
Yeah, it's here. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned that at Google you were a site reliability intern. Can you talk about the things you did at Uber and Eft?
Yeah, sure. So at Uber, I did backend for Uber Eats. So Uber Eats is Uber's new food delivery app. When I joined, the Uber Eats team was about 30 engineers. So it's really cool. It's kind of like a startup within Uber. But yeah, the day-to-day there was very different from Google. I'd come in around 10, like same time as Google. But I would be working all day. There would be a lunch break, but nobody at Uber liked the food at Uber. It was like random meat. Like people would say, "Oh, this is probably pigeon or something." So we'd eat out a lot. Sometimes we would order Uber Eats. At Uber, you would get Uber credits, so you could order food. But yeah, there were a few more meetings, just because it's a little smaller than Google. So interns are more important, I guess. And the team was really close. sometimes we'd play ping pong or something like that, and we would do it until pretty late. I would leave work around 9 to 10 p.m. every day. But yeah, Uber was a lot more intense than Google, I would say.
Okay. So
Yeah.
in terms of, I guess, your own personal growth and learning, would it be fair to say that you, I guess Allison's asking, did you receive more skills from working at Eft rather than Google, since you mentioned that it was a very specific area you worked in at Google?
I would say my skills at Eft are more marketable to other companies. So I like learned Rails and stuff over there, and I worked a lot with JavaScript. But again, it's a wider breadth. But at Google, you focus on depth. So I learned a lot about Google specific tooling, like the way they do alerts and stuff. I learned a lot about the databases they use, the file systems. So I actually I feel like I learned more quantity wise at Google, but it's just very deep. And it's not something you could transfer to other companies easily.
Okay. Let's see. So of all the companies you've interned at, if you had to pick one, I have a guess. Which one would you pick? Or is there some other company that is sort of a dream company to join?
Dream company to join. I would like something. My dream company would be a company like. I would not say like Google actually. Okay. I do say that it has small work hours, but I want to get I want to get a lot better at software engineering than I am right now. But Uber had too much of a workload, so I wouldn't say that. Ideal company is probably one of those top Andreessen Horowitz startups. Andreessen Horowitz is a VC that invests in a lot of like really popular startups. Yeah. So one of those startups, the ones that like Paul Graham is tweeting about. Paul Graham's the CEO or the director of Y Combinator, or was. But yeah, just basically one of those fast rising startups where you have a lot of impact, but you're still learning a lot of depth. If there's like a Rails app, like they don't really, I wouldn't say they don't consider the technical side, but it's not as much compared to some of the other startups I've seen. But I'd like a fast-paced startup that I guess I'd learn a lot from.
Okay, so you would actually prefer joining a startup rather than everyone's dream company, Google.
Yeah, I mean, okay. Google is nice, but I feel like I want to learn a lot more. I could always go back to Google later. I mean, not necessarily, but yeah, I mean, I'm younger, so yeah.
Okay. Yes. Let's see. Do you have any tips for, I guess, students maybe who are going into their own internships and how they can make the most of their internships?
Yeah, just talk to as many people as possible and try to learn as much as possible. It's always good to meet more people, and when you leave your internship, it's always good to like have that knowledge just in case you don't go back to that company. So if you're at Google, read about the internals of how Google technology works while you're at Google, because then when you leave Google, like you can't look it up anymore. And some of Google stuff is like years ahead of the industry, so it's just good to know, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
How important do you think networking and you mentioned before that in your first year you used a lot of your own network to try and get an internship. How important do you think is that for the average CS student?
Well, actually, in my first year I didn't network. I was cold calling. That's what I said.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's extremely important if you're not at a top tier school. So like if you're at Stanford, MIT, like you can just go to the career fair and everybody's gonna throw like interviews at you, and it's easier. But if you go to a state school or something like that, you really have to leverage a network to get connections with the top companies. Referrals are like a very powerful way of getting an interview, and just making your interview easier in general. Because if you have a good referral, they're going to be more lenient in your interview feedback. So it depends on where you are, I'd say.
Okay. I guess since you mentioned interview feedback, I just had another question. I guess what sort of feedback do you actually get from the interviewers? Was it anything concrete, or was it just you did well, you didn't do well, something like that?
Yeah, they usually just say you did well or you didn't do well. I think it's for legal reasons that they don't reveal why you didn't get a job.
Okay. So even for the companies that you did get an internship with, did they give you any more concrete feedback after you were on board, or?
No, they don't tell you why or why not.
Okay. So you just
Yeah.
the guessing game, I guess.
Yeah, you do. It's kind of annoying, but makes sense.
Okay. Um, were there any interviews that you think you did really poorly at, but you actually got an offer
I would say
from?
the Uber interview.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a question that was pretty much straight out of cracking the coding interview.
Hmm.
It was like one of the easier questions, but excuse me, I didn't get it right. But I think my manager or the guy interviewing me actually thought I got it right because I talked to him afterwards. We got lunch, and yeah, I thought I bombed the interview, but I ended up getting an offer.
Okay. Were there any that was the opposite, where you thought you did really well, but it turned out to not pan out?
Um, yeah, um, yeah, I had some product management interview recently. I guess it's a different topic. But yeah, I thought I talked really well with the guy. He seemed like he was really interested in me, but then I got a response saying that I wasn't creative enough or something like that.
Creative enough. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
At
yeah.
least
Sometimes
that's,
I guess they do give feedback. Yeah.
yeah, that's something you can work with, I guess.
Yeah. Kind of. Not really. Yeah.
Okay. Um, besides like only software engineering roles at this company, you also mentioned just now that you were interested in product management. Can you talk briefly about, I guess, how these roles interact at companies like Google, which are so large?
Yeah. So I actually worked at a backend team on Google, so I don't have direct
Mm-hmm.
experience working with a product manager. But from what I've gathered, basically, a product manager works with tech leads or program managers and tech leads. Program managers basically manage how the project is executed. Product managers basically just figure out what needs to be built. So they interact with each other, and the program manager and the tech leads figure out what needs to be built, and then the tasks trickle down. But in an organization like Google, product managers are considered part of the engineering organization.
Mm-hmm.
So they work pretty closely with engineers.
Okay. What about you mentioned like the Uber Eats project you worked on, or Eft, where companies smaller, but the team you worked with was smaller.
Yeah, so at Uber, I would talk with the PMs all the time. There are like three of them, and um, they're just talking with everyone. They felt like they were part of the team. I mean, they were, but yeah, it was a lot closer than at Google. At If, there was really no product manager. The product manager was the CEO,
Okay.
and yeah, we talked with him all the time too. So yeah,
Okay.
at smaller companies, I guess the role is a lot closer to engineers.
Okay. So, I guess for Uber, which would be the best example in this case, is the from your perspective, is the product manager's role less technical than software engineers? Because I've heard that it's actually just as technical, you just don't have to do coding itself. So I don't know from your perspective.
Well, yeah, you do need to know the technical side. At Google also, Google and Uber, the PMs all have some sort of CS background. So you need a technical background in order to become a PM at most companies.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Okay.
you don't really do coding in the job, though.
Okay. So it might be a good choice for CS majors who don't want to do coding day to day in their
Yeah.
job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. We also had a question emailed in earlier about cultural differences between these companies. I guess between startup and companies, there's some obvious differences, but can you talk briefly about your experience with this?
Yeah. So cultural differences. I think a big thing I realized is at small companies, people cut corners with money and stuff like that. Like at Google, you'd have like expensive lunches occasionally, stuff like that, or people would be like, "Oh, I'll just charge it to the corporate card." But if you never heard stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, people just really take advantage of the perks at large companies. It's a very perk-oriented culture. Yeah, so I would say that's the main difference actually. But both at startups and big companies, you don't see people who are like, oh, I want to join a startup because I want to make more impact. But it's just more like people just enjoy working on problems. It feels the same. The kinds of people you see there are, I guess, they have the same levels of ambition.
Okay. Was there any difference you think interning in San Francisco and interning in New York?
Yeah, there's a huge difference.
Oh, sorry, just for viewers who are not aware, Ian's Google interview was at New York. It was in New York, I believe. Yes.
Yeah, my internship was at New York.
Yeah.
Yeah. So New York is just a really fun city. So I've heard people say that it's nice because not everyone's in tech, which is true. But I think it's cool that things are open late. There's a subway system, so you can get home late without having to call an Uber. I don't know. I guess I'm talking more about the city than the internship. The internship was the same, but the city's really nice.
So the overall experience was still different.
Yeah, it's very different. Yeah.
Okay. We have another question from Allison who asked, how many companies did you apply to on your second try? I'm assuming she means after your freshman year. And how many of those interviews did you land? And would you attribute your experience with IFT to making you a more appealing candidate on their second try?
Okay, that's a good question. Let me see. So I don't think I actually applied to any companies like directly. Like I didn't apply online or anything after my IFT internship because there was an event in San Francisco called Internapalooza, where basically it's like a career fair in the middle of the summer. So there was that, and I didn't actually talk to many companies there, but I sent my resume, and then companies contacted me. So to answer your second question, I think IFT really helped a lot with that because they're a pretty known startup. I mean, not everyone knows them, but they still have a good reputation for being, a cool company that's kind of technical. Excuse me. So yeah, I didn't apply directly to any companies. I got people to refer me, if that counts as applying. I got someone to refer me for Google. Yeah.
Okay. So let's see. Oh, how many interviews did you land? I guess was
how many interviews?
Yes.
Well, yeah, I got interviews for everything since they were inbound.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was there anything interesting between these interviews? Maybe not for Google, but for some other company that you didn't end up going to?
Interesting at the interview, or
I guess the process. Were the interview questions, or is it just mainly the same technical algorithm related?
I mean, every company has its own interviewing process, so they're all interesting in their own way. I would say I really like whiteboard interviews. The only company I've been to that does those is Palantir, but I think Uber does those too. But I didn't have an Uber on site. But yeah, those you should prepare for those if you're going to a company that's whiteboard interviews because they're completely different than doing it on the computer.
Yeah. Okay. How many on-site interviews did you do for that round?
How many? I don't actually think I did any.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just gonna, because my follow-up question was, I guess, how was the experience with the on-site interviews? Is it similar to what we've heard from like full-time employees, where it's like a whole half a day or a whole day of just being at the company, or is it slightly different for the intern process?
Yeah, so I can talk about a recent on-site interview. It was about 3 hours long, but it was like 4 interviews back to back. Yeah, it was three interviews on a whiteboard, and then one was a lunch interview. I think the experience is different for every company. So
for these 4 interviews, were they with the same interviewer, or was it with different managers?
Yeah, it's a different interview each time. They were all just different software engineers at the company.
Okay.
Yeah.
We also have a question that's asking, is there a strong difference between interns and full-time employees in terms of what they do and the responsibilities given?
Sure. So again, it depends on the company. At Google, interns are pretty different from employees. All the interns hang out together in a clique, and you just don't feel like an employee. You don't have any responsibilities. But somewhere like Uber, I was a lot like an employee. I mean, I hung out with other employees. There weren't very many other interns while I was at Uber. There were like 20 in all of Uber at the time. So I didn't really get to meet other interns. But yeah, I think the smaller the company is, the more you're treated like an employee, like a full-time employee.
Okay. Pretty fair response. If anyone else, any other questions, feel free to throw them in the question tab or also in chat. Let me just browse through my. Okay. While I'm looking, was there anything else you want to share, Ian, just quickly about interview process? I have a huge
Interview
list here.
process.
Yes.
Yeah, I like to stress that studying cracking the coding interview is really important. A lot of people just go to the interviews and they didn't prepare at all. So like, yeah, sometimes they ask really basic questions and people don't get them. That's what my coworkers have said. So you should at least know basic data structures, and they're all listed in that cracking the coding interview book. Yeah,
okay.
it's pretty important.
We have a question that's asking, what were some of the most challenging things you did during your internships?
Most challenging things.
Or I guess the most challenging part of your internship.
I would say the most challenging part would be working with a completely foreign code base. Sometimes in a language you don't know that well, or in multiple languages you don't know that well. So that was the case at Uber. Like I would have to build a feature, but I'd have to modify. So Uber uses a microservice architecture. Basically, like you have each service does its own thing, and they all like call each other to produce Uber. So sometimes I have to modify like 4 different services. So I'd have to search 4 different code bases to find where a certain feature needs to be added, which is actually pretty hard. And you have to like understand the entire picture. And it's really hard when you have like a different code base for every service. It's just hard to like understand and search everything.
Okay. Yeah. Did you feel that you had a lot of guidance through the internships, or was it different from company to company?
Well, as time has gone on, I've had less. At Uber, for example, at the beginning of the internship, I'm pretty sure I annoyed one of the engineers because I asked so many questions. By the end of my internship, I was going on my own, and the guy's like, "You know the answer to this question. Why are you asking me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you're right." So yeah, it like built up my confidence, and I guess it shows that my internship actually taught me something. But yeah, a really important skill is just reading old code, reading someone else's code, reading legacy code. Like when you're working your own projects, you're only working your own code, so you never realize how hard it is to work on someone else's code until you have an internship at a big company. You actually have to do this.
Great. We had another question that was asking about, I guess, some coding speed. Like, is the speed you code at really important when you're a software engineer or an intern at these companies? Like, do they expect a certain amount of output in a day, or?
I think it depends on the company. At Google, I don't think they care that much. They just care you get your project done. So there's some people who finish their project like a month ahead of schedule, and they spend the rest of the time just like playing Smash Brothers and stuff. Yeah, they would have like a second project, but like their manager wouldn't really care that much if they completed it, because they already finished their big project and they were already really impressed. So yeah, that goes back to my theme of the culture where I guess they have more money to throw around at big companies, so they don't think your time like they don't need you to always be working. But yeah, at smaller companies though, I did get in trouble a few times, late to a few meetings. Like they would have 9 a.m. meetings sometimes, and I would come in at 9:10. Because I was really tired, and yeah, stuff like that would happen, and I would get in trouble. Or other times I would be building a feature for 3 weeks, but my manager knew how good I was because this was at the end of the internship. He knew my skill level, so he knew I could have completed this like faster than that. And he like had a talk with me saying, "Hey, you should get it together." And yeah, it depends on the size of the company. At a big company, they won't push you to work, but at a small company, they probably will.
Okay, it's pretty interesting. Let's see. Daniel just asked in the chat. You mentioned that you went to some hackathons. Did you? I think you said you didn't go to any hackathons actually. But I guess we can talk about hackathons in general. Like, do you think they're good networking? Like, do you think the purpose is for networking, or do you think it's a good way to push yourself to learn a new skill?
Yeah, I actually did say I went to hackathons.
Okay.
That's how I got my first well, yeah, hackathons are good for networking. I've met so many people in the industry through it. And now they've graduated, they're all in top tech companies, and now I can get referrals from them. So I don't have to apply online and wait for a month. I didn't go there for the sole purpose of networking. I went there to win. So I would try to find a team of really smart people, and those smart people end up going to top companies because they're smart. So yeah, I did not go there for networking, but hackathons are pretty fun. But you have to find the hackathons the smarter people go to. There's some hackathons that are just like business oriented hackathons where like you're not really going to get useful connections out of them. But then stuff like, for example, Hack MIT, you find a lot of really smart people there. So
would you recommend that it's a good thing for students to do before or during their student career?
Yeah, I would recommend it. You should definitely go to some.
Great. Let's see. I think that's it for the audience questions, actually. Does anyone else watching have any questions to throw in? If not, okay, I guess not. I think I have one more question here. Let me see. Let's see. Yeah, okay, so I guess this question is more about like your own career path moving forward. Like, what is your, are you currently a sophomore, junior?
I'm a junior.
Junior, okay. So
yeah,
are you looking for another internship for the summer going forward, or sort of what is your own plan or your own career path that you envision?
Yeah, so I'm applying for internships for next summer, but I'm also actually working on some startup ideas. So the career path I envision is to start a startup or something like that. Yeah, I'm building a few things right now. But if I weren't doing that, I would probably go in the big company career path.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was there anything else you would like your audience to know? Or anything?
No, that's it. Just study cracking the coding interview if you want
to. Yes, it's very important.
Yeah.
We mentioned it multiple times.
Yeah. Also, if you need any tutoring or anything like that, I'm available in Code Mentor, so you can just message me or something.
Yeah, Ian is a mentor on our site. I will send out a bunch of useful links and also some links to tutorials on our site that might be useful for everyone, and also a link to Ian's mentor page later on. So feel free to reach out to him if you have more questions or if you just like to chat with him or anything like that. Yeah, and this video will also be uploaded on YouTube later today, so feel free to share this as well. If Ian, you have nothing else to add, then I think we're going to wrap up. Okay, great. So thank you everyone again for joining us. Thank you, Ian, for doing this.
Thanks.
That's it for today's office hours. So take care, everyone. Bye.